I'd like to welcome you to Wethersfield and the American Legion meeting post 23 of the American Legion. And actually, stand please, flags right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To introduce to you our mayor of our town, who will begin the sermon this morning. You're welcome.
I think this is a really great event for Wethersfield. It signals a couple firsts. Wethersfield is the first community that was settled in Connecticut back in 1633. And we're lucky to get together to have one of our own. So the first senator from Wethersfield, and we're happy that he started this campaign, if you will, going to different communities that he served here in town. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Senator Chris Murphy, and he'll always remember his names here. That's right.
Thank you very much, Donna. Thank you, Larry, for opening up the Legion Hall to us. As I was remarking to Larry and a few others, I think the last time that I was here was when I came back from Boys State. I was a participant in Boys State in high school at Wethersfield, and Legion, of course, as I still think Legion does, sponsored us to go over there, and so it's wonderful to be back here, and of course, great to be back in a town that meant so much to me and still means so much to my family. It's great to have my parents here as well, and great to have so many friends. Thank you to everyone who worked cooking this great food. Let's give them a round of applause. This is the first of what we're hoping is going to be a series of pancake breakfasts that we do around the state. I was trying to think of what, a nice informal way would be to introduce myself around the state, to start some small community conversations amongst leaders in the different towns. And we came up with this idea to just get people together maybe once or twice a year in all of the major communities to just have a real informal conversation about what you need from Washington, to give you a little update on what's happening there that matters to you, and just take a little while over pancakes and syrup to have a chat. And we knew that this was the place to start, not just because it's where everything started for me, but also because we knew we had so many friends here that we could sucker into cooking. And that may not necessarily hold for all of the other communities we do this in, but this is a great start and a great turnout here today. Let me just acknowledge a few folks that are here. Again, to Donna, thank you so much for your hard work and for having us here today. John Consul, the Deputy Mayor, is here. Thank you, John, for being here as well. My hero, the guy that actually first got me involved in politics, the guy that I called to ask if I could volunteer on local campaigns here in Wethersfield, our Senator and Congressman Billy Seattle. And another round of applause for a great friend of mine and our state representative.
Larson, here you go.
So let me me not say too many things because I'd love to answer some questions and hear from all of you. But I wanted to just give you an update on where things stand in Washington today on a variety of subjects that I know are the topics of discussion here in town, and maybe talk a little bit about how that may be relevant to some things that you're working on here locally. Let me start sort of where every conversation seems to start these days, and that is around the issue of gun violence. I'm very excited about the bill that the state legislature passed. I'm excited about it not just because of the substance, which makes the Connecticut law the strongest in the nation, but I'm proud of how they did it. I'm proud that Republicans and Democrats came together to support that law, and I think that speaks something very well about our state. And I hope that there's some inspiration that gets drawn in the United States Congress from what happened here in Connecticut, because we are split government today. We have Democrats in charge of the United States Senate and Republicans in charge of the House of Representatives. And so we just got to be realistic that nothing is going to happen, nothing is going to become law unless we have both parties supporting it. And on the issue of gun violence, there are measures that enjoy broad bipartisan support out there in the public, as they did in the halls of Hartford. For instance, the issue of universal background checks. 90% of Americans support universal background checks. And just shame on Washington. We can't get that done when it enjoys so much support across the country. Dick Blumenthal and I are going to be holding a press conference later today in which we sort of talk about our agenda, which is going to be centered around universal background checks, a new federal law prohibiting gun trafficking, and a ban on these high-capacity magazine clips. We think that that would be a very good federal package. But we know we still have an uphill climb. We know that we've still got work to do to try to get partners on both sides of the aisle. And next week will be a big week in Washington. We will all return from the Easter work period. A lot of the Newtown families who have been lobbying up in Hartford will be down in Washington as well. I hope that this new Connecticut law, along with the President's visit here to the University of Hartford on Monday, will provide a little bit of extra oomph to the discussion in Washington. Understanding that that's only one piece of the conversation. And I think that's really important because over and over, the press wants to just cover the gun debate. And we all know that we have a woefully inadequate mental health system. I know we have the director of the town social service office here today, and she, along with everybody who works in the school system, can tell you how long it takes to just get a kid who is presented with some problems in school related to mental illness just to get them to a first appointment with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It just takes way too long today, and we've got to fix that. In addition, we've got to reach out and help our schools become safer places. I'm not interested in militarizing our schools, but school resource officers are a good thing in a lot of communities. You've had good experience here at the high school, and I know you've got an application in right now to the federal government to fund an SRO at the middle school, and I'm going to be working with the department and the lieutenant and the chief to try to help you get funding for that. And so we've got to talk about that as well. And my hope is that we're going to get something done in the next couple of weeks that'll honor the tragedy in Newtown and try to take some inspiration from good things that happened like the other night here in Hartford. So that's something that we can talk about here this morning. The second big focus in Washington, as will now be the big focus in Hartford, is the budget. What a mess. It's just beyond me as to why we just set up these manufactured crises one after another, right? I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that people out there just have stopped paying attention because they can't tell the difference, nor do they really care to want to know the difference between the fiscal cliff and the debt ceiling and sequestration. It's all fake to them. And it's time that Congress gets back on sort of a regular budget schedule, just like every town has to do, just like Donna and her team have to do, just like the state legislature has to do. Let's adopt one budget a year. Let's have that debate, and then let's move on. And that's our hope. A lot of us who are new to the Senate are really pushing to get back to a regular schedule where we do one budget every year, debate it out, and then move on to other things that are important. The challenge, of course, is that we're doing this amidst this $15 trillion debt that we owe, and there's no way that we're going to get out of that problem without a balanced approach. We're going to have to raise some taxes on people that can afford it, and we're going to have to cut spending in important programs. And I'd love to hear from you about the programs that you're most worried about being cut from Weathersfield's perspective. But my thought is that there are 3 programs that are at the top of the list that should be held harmless from those cuts. And I've heard it over and over again from communities, and I've heard it a couple times here today. My list would be education, infrastructure, and science. Those are the 3 accounts in the federal government that really do add enormous value to the economy. They grow jobs when you educate kids and you build roads and bridges, and you invest in science and research and development that can then become commercialized. And here in Weathersfield, that really matters. You've got a lot of infrastructure projects, whether it be your drainage system or the work to dredge the cove, the connection, obviously, to 91 and 84 here matter greatly, and we've still got a lot of work to do there. The new rail line that's going to come through the middle of the state is going to certainly help out this corridor enormously. So infrastructure investment, Connecticut benefits more than virtually any other state by infrastructure investment because our economic health is tied to how quickly we can get people to New York and Boston. But here in Weathersfield, along major transit routes, you've got a lot at stake as well. And so infrastructure is something you've got to protect. As a product of Weathersfield Public Schools, I know what amazing things you guys do here on a budget that needs to be bigger. And the federal government just isn't doing its part. We come in here and tell you, that you've got to comply with all these special education mandates. When we put it into effect, we told you, this was the federal government a long time ago, the federal government said they'd cover 40% of the costs, and now, for most communities in Connecticut, the federal government picks up 6% of special education costs. It's not fair. And so we need to acknowledge that the federal government isn't doing its share today to try to help you shoulder the burden of educating your kids, and protect that account as well. And then research and development. Connecticut is going to be a high-tech economy, and we've got a lot of those jobs here in Weathersfield. And so as we try to figure out what we're going to be next, we've got to recognize that we're not going to make ball bearings like my grandfather did at Fafner. We're going to make value-added high-tech products. And so we've got to fund research and development that's going to facilitate that kind of economy. And I think that'll be a really good thing for Weathersfield, which has a lot of those jobs as well. So those are the 3 accounts that I would protect as we try to get this big budget settlement as we go on. Those are going to be the 2 major topics of discussion for the next couple months in Washington. Gun violence legislation, mental health, and then trying to achieve some settlement on this budget. We will talk about other things. Immigration reform, for instance, will be on the plate. I'm a believer in comprehensive immigration reform that is compassionate and honest about what we do with the 12 million people that are here. That'll be on the plate as well. We're going to try to take a stab at reforming the No Child Left Behind law. We're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. What a disaster that has been for so many communities that have just been forced to teach to the test, suck all the joy out of learning. As a product of the public schools, as kids will be as a parent, kids will be in the public school system, as the son of a public school teacher. I'm just committed to a major reform of No Child Left Behind that's going to recognize that there are different ways to assess performance than just that one test. That's going to be on our agenda as well. And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about this morning. I wanted to just give you a little bit of a preview about some of the top line issues that we're going to be seeing, but I really wanted to hear from you. So I hope that you have questions. I hope that you have thoughts or concerns that you can share with me. I know people have days that need to start, so I don't want to hang people up too long. But the last thing to say is this. This is just intended to be the beginning of a very long conversation. I'm just thrilled to get to represent a state that's meant so much to my family, and in particular to represent a town that means so much to me. And so I hope you will just take this as an invitation to accept our open door, that if you've got problems that you need solved, if you've got ideas that you want put into action, that we are only a phone call away. I have virtually my entire Connecticut staff here with me today. If they could all just raise their hands. If you want to just touch base with them on the way out, we are just up the road in Hartford at Joe Lieberman's old space, and we are ready and willing to help in any way that we can. So thank you very much, especially to the great volunteers who helped put this together. And let me just open this up to all of you. So it's always the hardest to go first, but let me just open it up to folks who have questions, thoughts, concerns about what are happening in Washington today. So, oh, wait a second. Most important, the Jets. This is really exciting, and I hope people know what's going on with the Junior Engineering Technical Society at the high school. As a graduate of the high school, when I heard about this and I heard about the amazing work that they're doing, I really wanted to make them a part of this morning, and I wanted to give them some special recognition. I cannot explain all the work that they are doing because it is way beyond my scientific pay grade, but the engineering program that they have helped build and put together at Wethersfield High School is not only winning awards and competitions, but they are creating designs and products that are changing people's lives. The thing that really piqued my imagination was the work that they have done to help people that need wheelchairs for transportation to manage backpacks. Something that you wouldn't really think about too much, but it's a big deal to both try to manage to get around in a wheelchair, but also be able to carry stuff that you need to get through your day. That's not an easy task, and they have engineered a way to make that small but important piece of life more manageable for people. And so I asked them to come here this morning so that I could just present them with some recognition from the United States Congress for the great work that they've done. I'll just read the first sentence here. This is with tremendous pride and admiration that I congratulate you on your outstanding success and national recognition. As a graduate of Wethersfield High School, I'm incredibly impressed and awed by your work on the backpack adaptation system for wheelchairs and on your overall success of the Junior Engineering Technical Society. As participants in the Ability One Network Design Challenge, that's the challenge that they did so well, and your goal was to create, develop, and implement an assistive technical device for people with disabilities. It's fitting that you look no further than your fellow students at Wethersfield High School to identify a need and then a solution. The mechanism in which you designed to improve access to backpacks for wheelchair-bound students is not only a formidable invention, but it's already proven valuable to the students which it benefits. I commend each member of the JETS team for your supervisor, your teacher, Sue Fennelly, a great friend of mine, and all of the students and staff at Wethersfield High School for supporting you in this exciting and challenging endeavor. And I'm confident that you will continue to enjoy great success as members of JETS and individually throughout the future. I don't know who's accepting this, but a big round of applause. And this is this is really fantastic. Congratulations. And one of the big challenges that we talk about, guys, is how do we get more students at the middle school and high school level interested in engineering and math and science, the STEM field that we know we're going to need millions of new jobs in over the course of the next several decades, and you guys have provided an inspiration to your fellow students to follow your lead. That this isn't just about learning, but this is about changing people's lives. So thank you very much for everything you guys have done. Thank you for being here this morning. All right, that would have been embarrassing that I forgot to do that. I'll open it up at this point to folks to have a conversation about whatever we're talking about.
just have a couple of questions. First, thank you very much for being here, Senator Murphy. I really think what you're doing here is great to get towns involved and to get communities mobilized. And it's good to have a direct contact with our senators in Washington. As a middle school teacher, I'm very happy to hear you talk about mental health. You know, a lot of times middle school is where some of these tendencies start to display themselves, or you start to have concerns about students. And I've spoken with my own principal, I've spoken with other principals, and that is their number one concern, is that it's very, very difficult to clear those hoops and to get help for these kids who need it, you know, immediately. So I was very pleased to hear you mention that right off the bat. The other thing that I wanted to say, and I know that the climate is difficult in Washington right now, but as far as environmentally, we've been impacted severely in the last few years by mega storms, and it looks like that's going to be the trend. I would hope that at some point, and I know it's difficult, but perhaps there could be some New Deal style programs to do things like bury power lines and get our infrastructure, as far as that goes, underground. Yeah, this above line system doesn't seem to be too effective, and that would help, I think, ease the impact a lot.
Yeah, two great questions and comments. Yeah, on the mental health side, the focus right now at the federal level is on a concept that actually was part of the state bill as well, and that's the idea of mental health first aid, trying to make sure that we have services for kids that present in crisis. That's really important, to make sure that when a kid hits a crisis point, that there's no waiting time for services. I was in a domestic violence shelter in the Naugatuck Valley the other week, and you know, these are kids who show up at a shelter coming out of the most horrific incident of their life, fleeing a situation in which their father was beating them or their mother. And for those kids, it takes 8 weeks before they get an intake meeting with somebody in the mental health system. They literally just sit there in this shelter for 2 months without anybody talking to them about what they went through. That's just, that's not okay. And so from a crisis perspective, we got to do better. But that can't be the end of the conversation, because you know, a lot of times if you wait for the crisis, it's too late. And so we've got to have a much more robust preventative mental health system, so that when kids are just presenting with smaller issues resulting from trauma or just resulting from, you know, more routine mental illness, that they get the services immediately. And not only is that the compassionate thing to do, but it's the cost-effective thing to do. Because if you don't treat mental illness early, then it just is going to cost you as a society so much more down the line. And so, you know, my hope is that, you know, again, we don't balance the budget on the back of our mental health system. And the risk is that we're going to do that. You know, at the state level, you're looking at big Medicaid cuts. There's proposals to do the same with the federal government, and so I hope we don't. On the issue of the environment, yeah, I mean, what were 5 or 6 years ago the worst case estimates about climate change are mainstream estimates today. So scientists right now are coming to Congress and routinely telling us that by the end of this century, the globe is going to be 6 to 8 degrees warmer. And that is an absolute disaster. That means coastal cities are wiped out unless you build enormous seawalls. And you know, even cities along, you know, major river arteries like Weathersfield are going to be affected as well. Now, Weathersfield is, you know, somewhat protected because you've got a pretty good floodplain here, but it doesn't completely do the job. And so we've got to have a bigger conversation about what we're going to do to try to combat climate change. But in the meantime, I think you're right. We've got to do a better job of trying to upgrade our transmission infrastructure. What we found is that we just have an old and aging system in Connecticut. And so part of it is that we don't have enough stuff below ground. Part of it is just the system's old. I mean, the wires are old, the transformers are old, and we've just got to encourage CL&P and Northeast Utilities to make some serious upgrades over the course of the next 5 years, because these storms are not stopping, right? I mean, this is going to be a yearly incident in which we have a major storm that takes down our electrical system, and we can do the long-term changes to try to combat global warming, but in the short term, you know, we've got to pressure these guys to, you know, maybe return a little bit less money to their shareholders in the short run and reserve more of that money for capital improvements.
Thanks.
Talk a little more about what you were mentioning, the 13th, the science and Is that educational, or is that investing in small business economic development?
I think it's both. So I think as we invest in science, I mean certainly investing in STEM technology, certainly making it a priority to invest early on in science, technology, engineering, and math programs. We just don't do that, very well today. I think, rightly want to teach kids a broad array of skills, but we've got to recognize that there are some skill sets that are going to provide bigger value to our economy down the line. And so part of it is just putting more funding on the early side, but then it is also certainly putting money into research and development that's going to become commercialized. And that's what this country has historically done very well. And the reason why we led the world in terms of information age jobs was because we put a bunch of money in from a public perspective to build the internet. And it was public money combined with private ingenuity that created millions of jobs in this country. And so I would argue that, for instance, on the renewable energy side, we should be doing the same thing, that we should be putting some public money and public investment into renewable energy right now so that we can grow millions of private jobs here in the United States. I think it's certainly about putting money into private research and development as well. The danger, though, is that these automatic cuts that are happening right now are dramatically curtailing investment in research and development. Connecticut alone will lose this year $24 million in research and development funds out of our companies and out of our labs because of the cuts to NIH and the National Academy of Science and CDC. And so, right now I'm talking about trying to move forward on science funding, but we're moving backwards. I'd say one additional thing about renewable energy investment. I don't like the way that we're doing it now. Right now, the government is essentially picking winners and losers by deciding specifically which companies that we will fund with renewable energy grants, or picking what tax credits or tax deductions we will put into place. I would rather have a technology agnostic approach from the federal government, whereby we sit back and say, listen, we're going to create a new marketplace for renewable and clean energy, either through a carbon tax or through a cap and trade system. And then the market decides whether energy efficiency wins out, or nuclear wins out, or solar, or geothermal. I think that right now, the government isn't doing a very good job of picking winners and losers, Solyndra being an example. And I'd like us to just sort of set a new marketplace and then let the market decide where that investment goes on that particular field.
Along with scientific question, I don't want to get to a topic that is not in your knowledge base, but on April 15th, there's going to be a Supreme Court oral arguments of the Association of Molecular Pathology versus Myriad Genetics. Are you at all familiar with it?
There you go. You have now gone beyond my knowledge.
Basically, in about 2 sentences, that case, Myriad Genetics holds a patent on a gene, which was granted by the patent office, and the associate. You're shaking your head.
No. I mean, I think I know where you're going with this general issue.
And if Myriad prevails and the Supreme Court honors that patent, that would have a serious effect on biological research, especially with Jackson Labs coming to Connecticut. Do you think that there would be federal legislation or any interest in federal legislation to reverse that decision and disallow patents on genes?
I will be very, very interested to learn more about this. I know a sliver of what I need to know about it, but this is, of course, a fascinating new field of intellectual property in which people are trying to patent things that they didn't invent, that they merely discovered, and a gene being at the top of the list. My sort of first read on this, and I've done a little bit of research into it, I think is yours, that it would be incredibly destructive to biological research if we were able to essentially take all of the things that we're discovering with new mapping of the human genome and essentially segment portions of it only off to a certain segment of commercial society. So I think there would be a lot of interest in this should the Supreme Court go the wrong way. and extend intellectual property laws beyond, I think, where they were intended to go. And I've certainly got a lot more to learn about it, but in the interest of trying to, promote broad-based research and development in this new field, I think it would likely be a mistake if you essentially extended IP rights to our body. Right? I mean, that's essentially what you're talking about, is that somebody would have an intellectual property right to a piece of our body, which is, I don't think, exactly where that set of laws was designed to get us. So, yeah, no, I'd love to work a little bit more on that and have you forward some good stuff to us.
Senator, a member of the American Legion, and some of my colleagues here from the VFW, we work very closely with the veterans, especially those that need help in terms of medical things. And we have an absolutely beautiful facility which the federal government and the state government partnered to build in Rocky Hill, a brand new treatment hospital for traumatic brain injury people as well as long-term care. The only issue that I have, and I think everyone here recognizes, is that we hear some horror stories. We hear people, men and women, coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, who have to wait 6 months, 8 months, 9 months before their paperwork qualifies them to go down for treatment. And it sounds like the same situation with mental health. And we're just always wondering, is it just a matter of hiring more people in the VA to break the backlog, or is there something that, these men and women aren't doing right when they apply for benefits? I wonder if you can just kind of address the issue of the seemed like a long delay. Not always, but many times you hear that.
It is a long delay.
Yeah.
It is a long delay, and it is absolutely unconscionable the amount of time that it takes somebody. Essentially, what Larry is talking about is the process of disability claim. You went to war, you've been injured, you then qualify for medical treatment through your disability, but you have to go through a process of applying and claiming that disability. And that process, in large part due to the high number of people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with complicated injuries, has moved from weeks and months to now sometimes years. I mean, now it can sometimes take over a year or more to determine these claims, and it's just unacceptable. So this is not anything that the applicants are doing wrong. This is partially a matter of resources, but it's partially a matter of technology. This is where I have been critical of the VA and the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense and the VA have two totally different medical information systems. So if you are injured and getting treatment on the DoD side, and then you go to apply for a disability claim at the VA, the two information systems cannot talk to each other. And so the best evidence of a legitimate disability claim is that the DoD treated it for a period of weeks or months or even years. And yet you have to essentially reinvent all of that information on a new application to the VA. The two should just be able to seamlessly talk to each other, and if you did that, then that would essentially allow for automatic eligibility on the VA side if you simply showed that you had a record of injury and treatment on the DoD side before you were discharged. So the two agencies are not moving their record systems together. They made a decision that they're going to try to get them to talk to each other, but they're not going to fully merge the information systems. And there are a group of us that are going to try to push them to change that position, because that would be the most important thing they can do. We have to give them more resources, but even more important is to get them to put the resources together. If you haven't gone down to Rocky Hill recently, I hope that you will, because Rocky Hill still has the old aging facilities on the residential side, but this new skilled nursing facility that they have is really first rate. And Commissioner Schwartz, who interestingly is one of the only holdovers from the Rell administration to the Malloy administration, because she's fantastic. She has really done a great job down there, and it's always been a source of pride for Wethersfield. I know so many people here, including the Legion and the VFW, have always been so involved in the Rocky Hill Veterans Home because it's in our backyard. If you haven't had a chance to go down there and see the new facility, please do, because they're doing some important things there. And hopefully we're going to get around to some major renovations on the residential homes side, because those definitely do need a lot of upgrades as well, and that's going to be a priority for us in Congress and part of the village.
As a person with family or household, you're balanced in the red. You try to balance it matter of as soon as possible. Why do we have to wait 8 or 10 years for a balance to be flushed?
Because we're in such an awful hole that you just can't do it overnight. And the reason that we are in such a hole is it's multifaceted. So right now, I mean, we take in about 75% of what we send out. So we have a huge gap in terms of the money that we take in as a government and the amount of money that we send out. And of course, that compounds year after year. Our debt now is up in the $14 to $15 trillion range. We got there through a number of mistakes. 2 wars that cost us about $3 trillion that we all put on the credit card. Tax cuts in the neighborhood of $4 trillion that we didn't pay for. A Medicare prescription drug benefit that was a really good idea, but wasn't a good idea without finding a way to pay for it. And then an economy that just cratered, and that led to a lot of the deficit and debt as well. Just revenue stopped coming into the federal government. And so the problem is so big and so deep that you can't solve it all at once. If you did, you would really wrought catastrophe on the U.S. economy. And so we've got to do this along the right pace, and that's why it's going to take us 10 or 15 years in order to get the budget back to balance, because if you did it all overnight, you would essentially create more problems than you solve by kicking kids out of Head Start programs and shuttering mental health agencies. That would just be too much of a immediate burden to bear. But we've got to get this problem solved in that 10 to 15 year time frame. And the biggest nut here is healthcare spending. It's really Medicare and Medicaid that we're talking about to drive this. Discretionary spending, education, transportation, science, those things are a relatively small portion of the federal budget. So it's really Medicare and Medicaid that you have to get a handle on. And we don't have to cut funding for those programs, you just have to slow the rate of growth. You have to move Medicare growth rates from 4% to 2%, and you essentially make that budget and the overall budget solvent again. So you're right, when families get out of balance, they move pretty quickly to get back in balance. The scope of the problem at the federal level and the consequences for moving so fast are so grave to the overall economy that we've got to be a little bit more thoughtful about it. But we've got to get moving, and we have. I mean, in the last 2 years, we've taken about $1.5 trillion off of the federal budget. I mean, we've made some pretty significant progress, but it's not enough. We're going to have to make more. I've got these 2 little boys at home, and what I think about every night is that if we don't make changes, when my kids are taxpayers, basically half of their tax dollar is going to go to pay down the debt. There's not going to be any room to do anything else. All they're going to be paying is just service on the debt. And that is not a world in which I want to leave them.
I have the good fortune still to be teaching, and at the end of a discussion on the right to bear arms, I had a man raise his hand, and he seemed somewhat frustrated, and he said, with all due respect to the violence that gun control brings and the tragedy that it brings to us, the greatest threat he felt to every American was the threat of a cyber attack. And I told him I would be seeing you this week, and I would ask what the U.S. government is doing to kind of secure our systems that now depend so heavily on the internet and on electronic transmissions.
Yeah, I mean, these days it's hard to really assess what the greatest threat is, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who believe that it is a cyber attack, and you would be stunned to know how active other nations are on a daily basis at trying to penetrate our national security systems. This isn't something that happens every now and again. There are sort of professional hackers that are always trying to get into U.S. defense information systems, but the Chinese, on a regular basis, as a sovereign entity, are constantly trying to penetrate U.S. information systems as well. And we have an inadequate defense today. And so, President Obama and now Secretary Hagel have said pretty clearly that this is amongst the top priorities for the Congress, is to pass a new cybersecurity bill that will better allow us to track a lot of these attacks on U.S. information systems. The trouble has come from the Federal Chamber of Commerce, which is different than local chambers of commerce, but the Federal Chamber of Commerce has essentially stopped a cybersecurity bill from being passed in the United States Senate because they do not want to open up private commercial information systems to government eyes. a lot of these attacks are coming in not just to government agencies, but also to big private entities as well. And the government needs to know that when it happens. We need to know when the Chinese government is trying to attack a major transmission, system. Even though that's in private hands, it's important for the government to know that. And so the negotiation has been over, what level of coordination we can have between the private and public sectors in trying to assess these threats. But we need to do it soon. But it's just, as we've watched sort of the news about North Korea over the last few days, we're just reminded of, how great a variety of threats are presented to this country right now. It's a dangerous time to be an American, and cybersecurity is at the top of the list, but there are unfortunately a lot of other threats that are emerging is very close to the top of that list as well. Yeah, sure.
I'm getting back to the armed forces and the $3 trillion that was spent so far on the wars. I read some article where an additional $3 to $4 trillion will be spent in the next 15 to 20 years assisting the veterans that are coming back. And we're still assisting veterans from the Vietnam era that are still putting in for claims and disabilities and mental installations. So what's the federal government doing? When you talked about your 15-year plan, this is coming down the pipe, and we're going to have to address this. Is there anything in the pipeline now to start addressing this, so when this does happen, and the troops that we're going to have coming back are going to be tenfold compared to what we had coming back in Vietnam? How do we handle all that?
I mean, I think that the good news is, and Larry and others are Vietnam veterans. The good news is that today we have been able to sort of separate our feelings about these wars with our feelings about the veterans, right? I mean, there are big portions of the American public that oppose the war in Iraq, less in Afghanistan, but we all, I think, have made a collective decision that we're going to support veterans when they come back. And we've made major investments. When I came to Congress in 2007 and 2008, we enacted record increases in funding for the VA to try to address some of these backlogs, but also recognize that we're just going to have a flood of veterans coming back. And I can just tell you personally that my commitment is to make sure that promise that we made to soldiers, that when they come back home, we're going to take care of them in every way possible, is held firm. And I think that that's a bipartisan commitment. I think Republicans and Democrats are going to disagree on lots of things. I don't think we're going to disagree on our commitment to take care of these veterans when they come back. And you're right, they're going to come back with more complex illnesses than ever before. These guys that have done 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 tours of duty are coming back with levels of PTSD that we've never seen before. And it often waits a couple of years to present. And so they may come back thinking that they're fine, and then a couple of years down the road, they're going to need enormous interventional help from our VA system. So I think the commitment is there to get the job done, and I think that's something that's going to find two parties.
As the leader of the 4-H club here in town, any comment on funding of college? It seems like the loans for private loans for the interest rates are going up. It's becoming harder for students to graduate without large debt. And I'm hearing comments from parents of 4-H students that, students are graduating with large amounts of debt, and they just can't seem to find a decent job working landscaping or mowing lawns. It's really hard for them.
I think this is a really interesting conversation to have here in Wethersfield. Wethersfield is a quintessential community in which you have a lot of families who don't qualify for the biggest, most robust financial aid packages for schools, but don't make enough money to be able to afford the burden themselves. And Wethersfield is just a quintessential sort of middle-class community that gets squeezed by these rising college costs. This is a personal issue for me because I get this from both ends, right? I am probably one of the only senators who is still paying back my student loans from college, but I'm also desperately trying to save for my 2 little boys, and so I'm, Kathy and I have a pretty decent size of our monthly income that's dedicated to paying for college on both ends, and we're not alone in that. So a couple of things. sit on the committee that oversees our federal student loan programs, the Health and Education Committee. And the first thing we need to do is just, again, protect the programs that do work, like the Pell Grant and like the Stafford Loan Program from cuts. Those programs have to get more robust, not less robust. The second thing we need to do is be tough with these colleges. Colleges are going to accept financial aid from the federal government, and they can't have tuition increases that are rising at 6 or 7 or 8% a year. And we just should stop funding colleges with federal aid that don't get their inflation costs under control. And then I think, and I don't have all of my final thoughts on this for you, but I've begun to believe that we have to start having a total out-of-the-box conversation about higher education. I just don't know that we can afford the system that we have any longer. And I'm not sure that a 4-year liberal arts degree really adds $200,000 worth of value to the economy any longer. I'm just not sure that we can afford to pay for that as a society. I think we're going to have to start thinking in some new and innovative ways to get kids skill sets quicker than they get today. I don't know that we can afford that. 4 years of liberal arts education and then another 2 or 3 years of graduate education. Wait 7 years for a marketable skill and put that student hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I think we're going to have to just look at a radical reform of our higher education system that gets more specific, tailored skill sets into the economy in shorter chunks of time. And that maybe means, you know, a real hard look at our system of liberal arts education. Maybe it involves taking a look at how we can integrate online education into the process more than we have today. Really great online education that's happening today at much cheaper costs. So I think some of us